Hello, kind-hearted people of Earth and beyond. Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast, the podcast that aims to inspire people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness. My name is Brandon Blanks. I'm a writer and a stand-up comedian. I'm also the producer and co-host of this show. As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate. Thank you so much for tuning in and enjoy this episode of the Kindness Rising podcast.
All right. Welcome to the Kindness Rising podcast. This is Keith Page. I'm here again with Brandon Blanks.
How you guys doing?
And on our show for this episode are some dear friends of mine, Josh and Regan Copeland. And in just a minute, they'll say hi. And you're mostly going to hear Regan talk, although because Josh and I are so close and I love to put him on the spot, he's sitting in also. And he also mentioned that in case Regan gets out of hand or he needs to set the story straight, Josh will be bringing the hard truth. So Josh and Regan, hi there.
Hi, thank you so much for having us.
Hello.
Yep. And for those that don't know, Josh and Regan have recently moved, so we have to do this over the phone. They're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we go back to, gosh, you guys, what was it, 90, 96, 97, start of Rock Harbor Church, and we met there, and then our paths took us to Kauai together in 2003. We won't get into that whole story, but as people know, I lasted 3 months. You guys lasted, what, 8 years? 9 years?
Yeah, almost 9.
Yeah,
9 years. So we know who the smart people are, the story, staying in Kauai, 9 years. I love that. But through all of this, you know, it's just been a really a cool journey for us to go through life together. And something happened over the last few years that, you know, I got to watch. More importantly, you guys got to live, and I had no idea while I was watching it, much less while you were living it, that we would one day have a podcast and get to talk about it. But it's the journey of you guys, and really especially Regan, walking this journey with your mom in her last season of life. And so I want to highlight and talk about that because I know it's been beautiful and really meaningful for you guys. And it's been powerful for me to watch and to be able to add insights and thoughts because of while you guys were doing it, I was on my own journey of learning more about death and dying and hospice and those things. And so we're just going to have a cool conversation tonight. And Brandon and I will ask a few leading questions, but mostly we want to just tee it up so that Regan, you get to tell your story and your beautiful mom's story as well. Okay.
Great. Yes.
Okay. So let's start with, tell us who your mom is. And I'll probably talk more about, you'll hear me even say is versus was, because I think there's this idea of she still is, right?
Right.
We hold her in our heart and she's in our memory. Yeah. And as we talk about her, she's alive, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So who is she? And give us a little bit of just a few minutes of backstory of you guys, your relationship, and then lead us into how she came to, move into your house and why.
Yeah. So my mom's name is Linda, and she was a real powerhouse of a woman. Mm-hmm. She was... She broke glass ceilings in the 70s for women in like the corporate realm. She worked her way up in the airline industry and ended up being the vice president of reservations, or the president of reservations for AirCal. It was Air California, and then they turned into AirCal. And she was just always the female at the big boy table with all the men. Every week they would have these meetings, and she was the woman there. And she just was very, very intelligent. She just is very, very intelligent woman. She had me later on in life, in her second marriage. She had 2 daughters in her first marriage, and then a few years into her second marriage, really wanted another child with her husband, my father. And so they intentionally got pregnant and really kind of wanted a boy. And but then it was me, so I actually got a boy's name. At the time, my name Regan was only in the boys book, but my mom always liked to be different and do different things, and just kind of stand out in her hope was always in a classy, clean way. So Regan was the name they chose, my dad and her. And she wasn't super maternal. She wasn't really touchy-feely. It's not how she showed love. It wasn't her love language. She was a very hard worker. She was driven for her accomplishments in the workplace, which was fine. It's just who she is. She had a really difficult childhood. Her dad left her and her mom and her little brother when she was young, I think 7 or 10. And that was really hard on her. And he left because of an affair. And so because of that, she would never go spend time with him or keep relationship with him. He ended up having custody most of the time of her brother, my uncle. So there was many years that she didn't have her brother with her, but for the years that she did, and he was much younger than her, she kind of had to be the caretaker for him. She had stories of always like having to hurry after school to go pick him up from school. And her mom, being a single mom in that day and age, had to work really hard to provide for them. There was many years that they lived with her grandparents, but she still was expected to, pay her own way. So my mom did the brunt of the caretaking for her brother. So maybe that's part of why she didn't necessarily want to be a stay-at-home mom like most ladies were in the 60s and early 70s, because she had already done that, right? Maybe that's
right.
why. She was driven like, okay, I've done that. I've raised my brother. Now I'm going to, do what I want to do. So she worked very hard. I was in daycare. I went to preschool very early on. I went to like an in-home caretaker. I think when I was like 2 or 3 days old, she went back to work. She was just a beast that way. And luckily I had some really wonderful babysitters and in-home caretakers that I believe were very maternal to me, because although I love the things that I'm passionate about outside of the home, I was very driven to be a stay-at-home mom and do that with my kids. So I have to think that some women along the way really poured that into me.
Yeah, right. Modeled it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we weren't ever super close through my childhood years. We just had habits of how each day functioned because she worked and my dad worked. And as I hit those teenage years and was not a joy at all, it's a difficult teenager for her. I feel like she really even more pulled back. Nowadays we learn there's so much out there online about psychology and, every other reel is about being a positive parent and leaning into your kids having difficult times and all of that. She didn't have that.
Right.
So we had a lot of distance in my teen years. And then when I was 18 or 19, I started walking with Jesus. So I really tried to amend that with her. And then it was almost uncomfortable for her to try to be emotionally close. I could tell she tried, but, we didn't have this romantic, beautiful mother-daughter relationship. But it was, it is what it is. And that's okay. So my older sisters felt, well, her middle daughter especially feels a little more way more emotionally attached to our mom than I was, for sure. Just, I think because I'm much younger than them. They're quite a bit older, being from the first marriage. So when those sisters went through like hard things in life, they were really able to lean into my mom, because my mom had gone through hard things in life, where my harder things in life didn't, happen more in my teenage years, not so much like my adult marriage type things.
Right.
So I know that she was able to connect in that way. But for some reason, and maybe it was just the difference in our faith, that I leaned more towards my mother-in-law during difficult things, and other, ladies that were in the church with me and stuff. But she was still there and poured into our kids and loved to plan trips together, and very much her love language is very much like gifts, right? So she went without a lot in her childhood, because they were broke. So she had stories of, she would get her skirts for high school in ninth grade, and they got them big and hemmed them up to fit her. And then throughout her high school, every year they would let the hem out to make them longer for her, or sewing up the holes in her socks, things like that. So just to help mom not to have to spend extra or whatever. So, so I think the opposite of that was her working really hard to make a living, to provide well, to be an upper middle income woman, and provided and gave materially to her kids, and to herself and her husband, for sure. So very, very generous in that way. But as we know, that leaves holes in itself. So.
Sure does. Right. Okay. So, it sounds like, you guys there were things you could connect on, and then things that were, like you said, she wasn't able to provide, but you had other women as models and examples. But what she did enjoy doing, as far as the gift giving and the generosity, she was able to leverage and use her ability to make money and career and all that, and give gifts, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a little bit late, when I was a little bit older, she bought a craft store in El Toro, California. And then we connected a lot through that, because I really enjoyed those crafts and worked for her. But, then it was many, many hours she spent, probably, I don't even know, into the wee hours of the night, sometimes till 2 a.m., doing things in that shop, managing her inventory and cleaning the place and getting ready for events and stuff like that. So just a very, very hard worker. And then even further along, she just taught herself about computers and phone systems, and ended up being working for big hospitals, Kaiser Permanente, teaching people how to install and manage and run big phone operating computers. And she worked, I think, till she was 70 or 75, till she retired. Like, she retired once, and then they threw a big retirement party, and then they convinced her to come back because they needed her so much. So she was commuting a very far distance to work with them, but she also just loved to work. It was just who she was. And I think she would have worked till the day she died if she could have.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I know, as you're describing her, like you said, about you are wired in some ways different on the more nurture family side. But boy, when it comes to projects, events, use the word beast, and man, you can be a beast of the ability to have capacity for big projects, nothing you can't do or won't try to do, and put all of yourself into it. So I see that as an amazing quality in you that obviously she modeled, and whether that's modeled it, DNA, a little bit of all of it, you have that as well. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, you are right. I definitely get that from her, all of that event stuff, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, catch us up now. What happens that causes that there's something that happens with her health that causes or invites you and Josh to move into action? Tell us about that.
Right. Yeah. So we started to notice, what year was it?
We went to New York, right?
Right. We all went on a family trip. Her family does a family reunion every year in the Adirondacks in New York. And so we started to notice some things there. My oldest sister noticed more, just some different things, like she was driving her motorhome and was backing it into the space incorrectly and asking some weird questions about who put the tablecloth out on the picnic table, but it had been her. And there was a couple other things, like what she was putting out for us for dinner wasn't things that she normally would have put in combination together. So, we just kind of chalked it up to, oh, well, she's just getting older. Everybody's just getting older. It's part of old age. Mm-hmm. Over the next few months, or the next year, there were just more and more things that were changing and becoming different with her. And looking back, and now knowing what I know about Alzheimer's dementia, which is the end of this question, it was more than just forgetfulness. It was a real change in her personality. Usually when I would call and talk to her, and she might bring up, oh, I talked to your sister, and oh, can you believe it? This is what so-and-so's doing, and pretty gossipy, but in a negative way. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden when it had gotten to the point that I wouldn't even bring up people's names because I didn't want to encourage her negative talking about people. But she would bring up people or grandchildren, and all she had was positive. This is so terrible, but all she had was positive, really great things to say about everybody.
What's wrong with Grandma?
Yeah, that's
Something was wrong.
says her favorite son-in-law.
And it was so interesting and bizarre, and I thought, wow, she's getting so easygoing and nice in her old age. And my dad was starting to say things too, like, your mom is really driving me crazy. I don't know what I'm going to do. And he'd have little stories about her just not even eating, or not making him dinner, or she would just sit and stare at the wall. He had all these very strange things. I thought, well, she's been so busy for literally 78 years. Like, let's give the lady a break. Mm-hmm. Maybe she's just tired. The big light bulb for me, my whole adult life, cruises have always seemed really fun to me. And once I'd been on one, I just thought we should all be doing family cruises. And she basically had always said, over my dead body, I get seasick. I don't want to be trapped. We could go so many places and do so many things and have choices. On a cruise ship, you're stuck, blah, blah, blah. But your father would love to go. So anytime you go on a cruise and you want to be a family cruise, take your father. So that had always been in the back of my head. Well, two of our two middle children were graduating high school the same year. And we decided that for the graduation, and then also one of them our daughter was turning 18. So this was 4.5 years ago. We were going to go on, that little 3-4 day cruise to Mexico, and we were all going, and my in-laws were going as well. And I thought, gosh, you know what? Let's just throw out the offer. Let's see. So I said to my mom, I think I told asked my dad about it first, and he said, well, we'd love to go, but you're never going to get it by your mom. So I got her on the phone and I said, Mom, we're all going on this cruise, the whole family, except our oldest. And even, Mark and Rosie are going. It's going to be a great thing. And it's only 4 days. What do you think? And she paused for him and she goes, oh, I said, would you come if we paid for you? And she said, oh, that sounds wonderful. I don't know. We're going to have to try to convince your father. And it was kind of I just kind of went back and forth like, wow, old age really is treating her well. But then at the same time, in the back of my head, I knew that this was very different and very wrong.
And there hadn't been some like change of heart really that she didn't start meditating and then there was this just sort of there was no reason for the change, so that probably makes it a little more concerning than like I said, she started doing yoga and then she starts being a little it's different.
It's not like she had started going to Al-Anon or yoga or church or anything like that. There was no explanation for this change of personality.
And is she kind of the person who would have hid things that were coming up that she was noticing, probably, like if she was noticing her memory was slipping a little bit? Was she the type of person that would not ask for help? That's
right. Absolutely. And so she's a very, very proud woman, very private with her medical things. So she had started going to a neurologist, and her response to me about the neurologist was that they thought she was depressed. And so that was ridiculous, but she's taking the medication from them. And this is a woman who her whole life would barely take an Advil or an aspirin, maybe some Pepto-Bismol once in a while, but that was it. So she starts taking all this different medication and going to a chiropractor and a podiatrist and all these things. That was just not her. She would avoid the doctor at all costs. So I thought it was great that she had admitted that maybe she was depressed and that maybe these pills would help her. And then on the cruise, you if you go sit in the dining room for every dinner, you're sitting at the same table with the same waiter. And on the third night, that was the fancy dress-up night, we had already been to this table 3 times. We had already had the waiter and his assistant 3 times. She had already ordered her rosé wine, or 2 times, sorry. Had already ordered her rosé wine from this gentleman 2 times. So we sit down to dinner, and the waiter comes up and he says, "How are you tonight, Mrs. Gifford?" And he hands her a menu. And he said, "Would you like rosé wine?" And she looked at him like his head was on backwards. But she said, "Yes, I would." And as he walked away, she looked at me in such a shocked look. Now, the first day of the cruise, she had almost escaped from us on her wheelie, on her electric wheelchair thing. Okay. Just zoomed up the ramp, like taking off, and we're stopping. They stop and take your pictures along the way. So we had to, our youngest Ezra had to run after her and get her back. But after we were on the ship, her and Ezra had gone and gotten hamburgers at the little hamburger stand. So that's what was in the back of her head. So after the waiter walks away, she looks at me so surprised, and she said, how does he know my name? Why does he know my drink order? What are these big menus, and why aren't we getting a cheeseburger? And my dad was sitting next to her, and he looked at me with this expression on his face saying, "See, this is what I'm talking about." Right. And right then I just sat back in my chair. Sorry.
Oh, don't be sorry, sweetheart. It's okay.
And I knew, oh my gosh, she has dementia or Alzheimer's.
Right.
So we had, so what I had been chalking up to possibly a problem, but most likely old age, just at that moment really hit me like, okay, it's not just old age. It is really something.
Right.
So that's when I first really knew. And then over the rest of the summer, my dad continued to have really bizarre stories of what was going on. He had said that she was going to her doctor's appointments, but that she was coming home without any real answers. Then we saw her in September for our son's graduation from the Marine Corps boot camp. And when they went home, my dad had even crazier stories, and he was pretty much at his wit's end. And so, we're talking about a 79-year-old and a 76-year-old, and my dad is partially handicapped and doesn't have great health himself. So that it was a lot for him, and
they weren't living close, right?
Right. No, sorry. They lived in Bullhead City, Arizona, and we were in Huntington Beach, California. So I couldn't help them, and there was no family near them. So after story of these things, and my dad just becoming more and more frustrated, and it became apparent that he needed to not leave her home alone. I joined, and this is one of my biggest recommendations, I joined on Facebook some Alzheimer's, dementia, like family groups, daughters of family with dementia, things like that. And I started learning a lot.
I bet.
So much, so many things. So I got in my car and I went out there to assess the situation. And it became really apparent that he couldn't care for her full time. And then I went with her to a doctor's appointment. And I was really ready to rip this doctor's head off, because all I kept hearing back from my parents was that the doctor wasn't really giving them anything besides she was depressed. So we sit down and the doctor says, okay, so what can I do for you today? And I said, well, there's clearly something wrong with my mother, and I'm wondering why she doesn't have a real diagnosis. And this doctor looked at me like she could have shot me, slammed her pencil down, shut her keyboard, looked at me and said, I told them she has dementia months ago. Where have you been?
Oh, wow.
And I almost fell out of my chair. So as we were leaving the doctor's office, my mom looks at me and she goes, ugh, I need a new doctor. Can you believe it? She thinks I have dementia.
Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that crazy? And I said, and because I had read what I had read on the Facebook pages, I wasn't going to argue with her.
Right.
And I said, you're right, Mom, we'll find a new doctor. And that right then I committed to never tell my mom remind my mom or tell her or make her face the fact that she had Alzheimer's, and to just let her live her life as happily as she possibly could.
Wow.
And did you get that recommendation from these Facebook groups? Like that's a common thing that's like the better way to deal with that sort of situation when you like it doesn't help to know that you have Alzheimer's.
Right.
Oh,
no.
I did not know that. Honestly, I feel like if I got it, I'd want to be kind of reminding myself because
Right.
But yeah, it's better to just kind of let them be in their own world, whatever that means.
Right. So there's two schools of thought really on that. And my decision to do that was really just kind of a deduction I made from reading post after post after post and reading hundreds and thousands of comments. Because someone would post like, my loved one is throwing his lunch at me, mad at me because I won't give him the keys. And I explained to him, I'm not giving you the keys because you have dementia and you're going to crash and kill yourself or you're going to kill somebody else. So no, you cannot have the keys. And it was just story after story like this of people saying, I told them you can't go to work today. You have dementia and you're 92 years old. And they're screaming profanities at me, or they're throwing their dirty diaper at me, or they're climbing out the window to escape from me, or they're calling the police on me. And it didn't take reading very many of those for me to decide, well, stop telling them that.
Yeah, that's smart. You should patent that tip.
Right.
Have you thought about just treating them like a little kid? That's kind of, yeah, okay, sweetheart. Yeah, sure. Well,
Right.
yeah, that's very compassionate of you too, because you want to be right, and especially when they're being a little probably problematic, you want to tell them set them straight. But
right. But when you think about it, if somebody said to you, Brandon or Keith, you have Alzheimer's, and within the next 3 to 5 years, your brain is going to be mush. And although you, in your cognitive state right now, might be okay and want to be able to make plans and things like that, as you go on with that diagnosis, that's going to create fear in you or sadness. And a result of fear and sadness is very often anger. So, of course, that person ends up acting out in anger or fear that this is their, that this is what their life is. And most of the time, they didn't believe their caretaker anyway. So it did them no good, really, to keep doing that. So I had to get really, really good at basically manipulating her or creating her surroundings. She wanted her keys to her car. So we just made up a story that the car didn't work or the car was in the shop. We parked the car up the road and told her, the car is in the shop. We're waiting for this part to it. So we carried that for a long time. We eventually sold the car. And really that story we had that story for 3.5 years. We're waiting for the part. And she finally one day she said, it seems like we've been waiting for that part for a really long time. Maybe we should get a new mechanic.
That's nice. There is some humor to it, at least, throughout the sadness.
Yeah.
That's hey. How long was she have noticeably have dementia and Alzheimer's?
Or?
How long before was she living with you guys? Like how long was her? I don't know how to put it.
Till she passed away.
Yeah.
She was with us for 3.5 years.
Okay.
And we got her to come with us because her home that she had in Bullhead City was a beautiful home. She was very intentional in how she had it designed. It was her forever place. She even had it designed, ironically, to handle, wheelchairs and caregivers and all of these things. But, there wasn't anybody under the sun related to her that was going to pick up and move to Bullhead City, Arizona, to take care of her and leave their life. So I told her on that visit after I met that doctor, Mom, I'm going to Disneyland on Monday. Do you want to come back with me to California and come also? And she said, yes, I would love that. She loves Disneyland. And in her later days, she believed that she owned Disneyland, actually, and also that she was the president of the United States. And then even during the election, she said, they called and they want me to run again. And I said, they did. And she said, not only they don't even want me to run. They just want me to be president because they were so happy with how I did it last time. So,
and remember, there was a time when we thought she might be the best candidate
right.
of either party, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that says more about politics these days than your mother's condition. That's
So I packed up her stuff and brought her to California and bought her a Disney pass.
hey.
Wow. So, I mean, you're starting to read Facebook stuff, trying to get it equipped, right? Preparing yourself, and then make the jump. And next thing you know, she's with you guys. I forget if your dad came right away or not.
No, he didn't.
Okay.
First, we were bringing her to just kind of assess the situation. My dad and I had a person over to his house to kind of talk about some different options, and the options were small. They could provide the state would have a caregiver come in for 12 or 16 hours a week, but that wasn't enough. My dad has commitments he has a few times a week. And so it just wasn't going to be enough for him to be able to keep in his commitments and grocery shop and attend to his life. On top of the fact that if something, he has precarious health himself. So had he dropped dead of a heart attack or had a stroke, she could not have called 911 for him.
Right.
She had already been outside wandering the house in the desert or laying down on the gravel in front of their house, staring up at the sky, saying that she was watching a movie. So you can't have an 80-year-old woman doing that where it's, 110 degrees. She would die. So the
caretaker wasn't enough.
Right. So a caretaker for 16 hours, thank you, was not enough. The other option would have been to put her in a home. But then what happens very often is if you don't have the money to pay for that, you put your house up. And so the remaining loved one could stay in the home as long as the person in the facility is alive. But as soon as that person passes away, the facility takes ownership of your home,
Wow.
and then the remaining loved one is homeless. Well, that house was they had their Social Security, but they had put their everything into this home and its equity and everything else. So that really was going to be a very difficult option. And we have a few kids, and it was mostly my husband and I, and our youngest, Ezra. We just kind of had a family meeting, if everybody would be on board for having Grandma stay, and everybody helped look after her and things like that. And that's what, we really, in praying about it, we really felt like that is what the Lord had for us to do. And in looking at what the options were, out of all of their kids, I'm just the one that I'm just the one with that straw.
Mm-hmm.
That straw of the ability to do it and the heart to do it. And I'd been a stay-at-home mom and was starting to look back at starting up my event planning business in California again, but naively kind of thought that I could do that with her at home. Quickly realized that I couldn't, because to do that would have been saddling mostly Ezra, our youngest, with caretaking her even more than he already was. And I didn't want to do that. So we just made it work.
Wow. I know there was a lot of, sacrifices, and we can say, oh, those weren't sacrifices because it was for the, whatever, but it was. I mean, everybody did sacrifice. Yeah. And yet I know that's nobody regrets that, but what changes, what was that like for you guys, and what was, the impact, I guess, on you guys making a decision to do this? How did this impact your family?
I would say that it was a huge ask of Josh, especially because in her former self, and a little bit even in her Alzheimer's self, my mom did not like Josh. And I don't know that she would have liked anybody, but we got married very young, and her biggest desire for me was to, do things in order, graduate high school, graduate college, work for a little bit, then get married, then have children. And I didn't. I graduated high school. I did some college. Joshua and I reconnected and from high school and got married very quickly, very young. We were 21, barely.
I was irresistible.
Oh yeah, you just have that effect on her, Josh. What can we say, right?
And I think his jinx was when we were in high school, and he came over to our house, and but his thing that he always said was, "Oh, parents always love me. Mothers always love me."
Oh man.
Well, we had a rule in my house that boys were not allowed upstairs, and at this point, Josh and I were just friends. He was hoping for more, but we were at the time just friends, and he was partway, most of the way up the stairs, sitting on the stairs, chatting with me while I was putting on my makeup, and we were, I don't know, going to coffee or something. And my mom came home and opened the front door and saw this boy partway up the stairs. And what did she yell at you?
Get your ass off those goddamn stairs. That was the first
Linda.
time I met her.
You're like, nice to meet you too, future mother-in-law.
And it didn't get any better.
Right. It was all downhill from there.
That's about where it stayed from there. And which is so ironic that then, her last 3.5 years, if it weren't for Josh, she would have been Lord knows where. Who knows what the decisions would have been for her caretaking if it weren't for Josh saying yes to me bringing her into the home. And, he's the breadwinner and so supportive of me being a stay-at-home mom and doing my little side hustles and taking care of her. Mm-hmm. And, he would make her special food, and, she loved pate with
never worse than
in a certain way, and
crackers.
he would make it for her. He goes to work all day long, comes home and makes this for her. And he was just so lovely and sweet to her. And the first Thanksgiving, I think she was with us, she was coming down the hallway and he was resting
This is the one thing
in our room. It is
the one story when she was nice to me. And she had Alzheimer's at this point. So
Right. So it barely counts.
So she's coming down the hall and she looks at him and she almost has tears in her eyes. And she looks right at him and she says, I just want to tell you, thank you for everything you're doing for us. And he's in our room and he's almost like freezes, like, is this a trick? Did she find a weapon? And she says, come here and give me a hug. And I made them stand there and let me take their picture because I wanted to remember it always. So the biggest sacrifice I think is on his part because gosh, just as a man who's been treated so just kind of as an afterthought in her mind, for him to really stand up and empower me to care for her and to do what's right and step in and be that person for her is huge. Other sacrifices, I put my event planning on hold. And there was just things we couldn't go do if we didn't have somebody to watch grandma, or big sacrifices on Ezra's part, because as a 15, 16, 17-year-old boy, when you're home and you're that age, you just want to play video games or take a nap or be on the phone or whatever. But if we were out or taking care of things or doing stuff ourselves, he was in charge of grandma. And he connected so well with her. He had such an amazing way with her. He would throw the football in the house with her. He would dance with her. Our daughter Riley would get her dancing. He got the was it during COVID? He got the BB gun out and was practicing target shooting in the backyard, and she was interested in it, and she said, "Hey, I wanna try that." And so he gets her all set up with this BB gun, and she hit it in the bullseye.
Well, he's videotaped it.
Oh, and he videotaped it.
Wow.
Awesome.
And then I think he posted it. He put it on Instagram.
And
we said, you need to take that down. And he's like, why? She hit a bullseye. Aren't you impressed? I'm like, well, she's a dementia patient and you're not 18 and she's standing in the house shooting out the slider door. It's open, but it seems like there might be some laws or violations here. I don't know. I'm not totally sure, but just in case, let's take that off.
Yeah. That's the innocence of kids on social media. They're just like, what? What do you mean? It's
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Totally. This cool thing.
And that is pretty cool. I'll admit, I would have shared that video. Seeing that could have gone viral. You guys lucked out.
Right.
Pulling
totally.
that quick.
So, but I know that he had so many sacrifices for those years also. There was a time that he actually went through a health crisis right before his 17th birthday. So we have my mom there. We're dealing with difficulties and things going on in our extended family. And we thought we were looking at a MS diagnosis for Ezra. But at the same time, our older son had just had a baby. So we weren't able to really be there in those first few weeks for them, for him and his wife and their new baby. Because, we've got grandma. We can't... even if Ezra was okay to be home watching TV, he couldn't be in charge of grandma for us to be gone. So, it's just a juggle finding people. We had so many dear friends and family. I call them our Ohana. Keith is part of that. Just people that dear friends that stepped in and helped us a ton many times with caretaking or running errands or getting kids places. Things like that it took a village for sure.
Oh. They say that dementia is the long goodbye.
Right.
And what was that like for you to have her in your home, and she knows you better than anyone as your mom, and yet you're watching her a few days at a time or a week at a time. I don't know how quickly, becoming more and more forgetting, some or most or all of those stories. How was that, and how did you handle that?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that changed with her was she forgot how to be. Her former self would be so proper and exact and matching and proper. But she would come out of her bedroom in the morning wearing I was very purposeful in laying out clothes that matched, because she would have been horrified if she just dressed like a rag doll. But she would be carrying toilet paper rolls, and she would have on this crazy hat, and she had this necklace of Christmas jingle bells from Disneyland. So we could almost always hear her coming. Right. She'd bring her trash can. She kept taking the trash can out of the bathroom. So we didn't have all of our accessories for our rooms and where they should be, because she would start walking around with them. And so I think that was one of the biggest things for me, was that she just forgot how to be. And, just like, you just let the preschooler do those things, I would just let her do those things. I did get a little irritated about the trash can finally, and I don't remember what I did to solve the problem.
Glue it to the floor.
Right? That was I think that's,
Got a construction worker drill it down,
You know what? She finally one day said, "This is my husband's trash can. I'm taking care of it for him." So I got my dad on the phone and got him to tell her, "Hey, that trash can you've been carrying around, thank you for managing that for me. I really would like it to be in the bathroom." And then she left it in the bathroom.
Wow, weird.
And then there was some things. Sometimes she knew she needed to be reminded of things. She would just say, "You are my daughter, right?" And I'd say, "Yes." And she'd say, "And your name is Regan, right?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you for reminding me." And one time she said, "I'm sorry I had to ask you that." I said, "That's okay, Mom." And she said, "Sometimes I just forget things." And I said, "You know what, Mom, that's okay. That's why I'm here, to help you with the remembering."
Yeah.
And it's okay. I don't mind helping you remember if you don't worry about not remembering, because I didn't want her to spiral.
Right.
She could sometimes spiral about things, and then we're on this roller coaster for 3 days. So she said, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea." So.
Wow.
Now, is not knowing that you have memory issues, like, is that more than a symptom? Is that like a symptom? Is that it's not a common thing? It's something that happens to everyone. Like, does anybody who gets Alzheimer's or dementia have like a mindfulness about it, or is it kind of invisible to you because it's the way
Yeah, I'm not totally sure about that, actually. I think for her, because she was so prideful, I think she just wanted to pretend that she didn't have this issue, and kind of like she's going to get away with it. She was kind of a sneaky woman, always trying to get away with things. So I think she just thought we didn't notice. What I did think of something that was kind of hard. I mentioned that she owned a craft store, and she's very talented and very crafty. I have a few of her pieces still. We all do, because she would give them to us as gifts. But I got out some things like she would normally paint. And she said, "Oh, I don't know how to do that." And so I brought up a pic. I said, "What if I show you a picture?" So I brought up a picture online of something painted similar and said, "Here you go." And she said, "Well, I don't know what paint colors to use." So I gave her some suggestions, and then just put out one paint color at a time. And where this woman had been this amazing artist, she was now painting like a preschooler. And that hit me. That was a hard one. As they lose themselves,
Right.
Even in I think that she emotionally poured into me as much as she was capable of doing. And I've really kind of unpacked a lot of that in the last 2 years. Really got a further understanding of just what kind of life and emotional heaviness she lived under. And I've really come to understand that her lack of the ability to be very emotionally giving was a survival tactic, and she just didn't have it. To give any more emotionally, to me, would have been to not have it herself to make it through her circumstances. So I just, as they just kind of lose themselves, I guess is the big thing for caregivers.
What were the things I got to watch you guys find things that she continued to delight in on a regular basis to enjoy, from, puzzles to Disney, but talk about just some of, I know those are a couple that come to mind, but what are some of those things that she just, you knew if she had these things, she was pretty much going to be content and excited about the day?
Yes. So puzzles, I'm convinced that we were the single greatest number of puzzles owner. We probably should have entered ourselves to the Guinness Book of World Records. We owned every puzzle that the Dollar Tree ever created. Every Dollar Tree. I would go to multiple Dollar Trees. If we were on a road trip, we would stop at Dollar Tree to see if they had different puzzles than our Dollar Tree.
Did they usually?
They often did, yes.
Yeah, that's good. Good to
have
know.
a couple extra.
For the fanatics out there, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just stay at your Dollar Tree.
Anybody
Yeah, venture out.
Get in that car, folks.
Right. Yep. So check out a different county, head off to another county and check out the Dollar Trees. Any puzzle, usually like 100 or less. And then as she progressed, it became like 48 or less or 26 or less.
Well, then she would just, she had 800 puzzles, and she would just do the same 2 or 3 over and over and over again.
Yes,
Wow.
she would.
Wow.
And so because I wanted her to stretch her brain, I wanted to slow her process as much as possible. That's the goal, right, is to slow that down. So I would rotate them out, her puzzles. And then another thing was ice cream. It was very hard. If you needed to go somewhere, it was it's like having a newborn, right? Like you're all ready to go, and then the newborn poops or vomits or whatever, and it's out of the car seat, and you got to change them, and then they do something else, and now they're crying, and now they're hungry again. This is caretaking. But if you told her that we were going to go get an ice cream, oh man, like a bat out of hell.
She'd get in that car.
She would get in the car so fast. She would just start shuffling like a mad woman. She didn't have a full walk. It was a shuffle gait.
Oh, that's right.
But McDonald's ice cream. And then we usually did McDonald's because, gosh, we'd be in the poorhouse if we went to like Cold Stone every time we got an ice cream. And then Disneyland. Disneyland was huge. Before COVID, we would go probably 3 or 4 times a month. And that was great. And I really think that the adrenal glands are a really big key to Alzheimer's and lucidity. Every time we would go to Disneyland, if we hit at least one big roller coaster, she was more lucid the next few days than she was the previous days. She could hold conversation, where normally she would kind of just sit and do her puzzles and be really quiet. All of a sudden she'd like pitch into conversations or throw out her opinion of whatever it was you were talking about, or just,
all stop and look at
right. And
wow.
she'd like say something really smart and as if just herself again. It was so wild. Like we'd all kind of stop and there'd be crickets, and we'd try to figure out where did that come from. But her favorite ride at Disney, well, she had all her regular small favorites like Small World and Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland. But she really loved Guardians of the Galaxy, that huge one that like bounces up and down.
Tower.
Tower 2. Yeah,
Right,
that's a scary one.
Yeah. That's her favorite.
Favorite. And she'd shuffle on and off of that thing. And we actually had people clap for us as she would get on or off this roller coaster.
That's awesome.
Often people would stop and say, I didn't even look at the ride. I just leaned forward and watched your mom the whole time.
Wow.
It was great. And one time getting on and off of the Matterhorn, everybody in line started clapping for her. And she said, well, what? She said, oh, they must know I was the president.
That's great. Wow.
Yes, I think they did.
Right?
Mom.
You are.
Yeah, it was amazing. Amazing.
That's interesting that you think the adrenal glands have something to do. It's like maybe her body because that is one of the scarier rides at Disneyland. So maybe her body secretly liked feeling that feeling because it did kind of make her more effective, or it's like subconsciously she's like, it was reinforcing like, oh, when I get scared, I actually feel better afterward. That's very fascinating.
Right, isn't it? It's really interesting, and I came across that thought, not just her lucidity, but there was one particular week that I was having I was in a hard space for my own life. And we went to Disneyland and we went on that ride. And and on that ride, like just that adrenaline rush, I found myself crying about her, crying about just whatever was going on. But then I immediately felt better. Like it was just such this amazing release. And that's when I really started thinking about her lucidity and how she'd be after roller coasters. It's really quite interesting. I should probably send Dr. Amen a little note or something about that.
Right. Yeah. I know. I was thinking, man, that'd be a cool study, taking Alzheimer's dementia patients on roller coasters or something.
Right.
Doing a study afterwards, or any type of feelings, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Before we get to the move towards hospice, you got to have Josh, because Josh and I spent a bunch of time together during this season when she was trying to sneak out.
Oh, gosh.
And Josh would always have funny Linda stories of her, out of her room, down the hall, around the corner, him being in bed. So he's got to tell us what that typical scenario was like, and at what time of day or night that was. And
Yeah, I was perfectly situated because my bed, where I slept, I was able to kind of look down the hallway towards her room, and then we had a baby gate, or a pet gate. Was it a pet gate?
There was a baby gate.
A baby gate at the end of the hallway with a bell on it, and so when she would try and get out, she would like shake this gate, and it would go and rattle and rattle, and that happened often, like almost every night, yeah. In the middle of the night where she was trying to get out. And I always just remembered, like, after a while, I'm like, Regan, your mom's trying to get out again. Like, and then Regan would post a sign. She put a sign on it.
Right. So my goodie was during COVID, right? So she's listening to us have all this discussion about COVID and the pandemic and the danger, and we can't go out and all this stuff. So I typed up this notice, like it was from the government, and taped it on there that said, like, between this hour and this hour, it is not safe to go into the main part of the house. Like, it gets sprayed and it kills any possible COVID.
Wow.
And, you cannot pass here, blah, blah, blah.
Basically Japan's or China's rules.
Yeah, really,
right, exactly. And it worked a little bit. And then after a while, she looks at it and she looks at me and she goes, "That's bullshit."
I know the CDC's going crazy, Mom. We don't know what to do.
Yeah,
right.
Damn Fauci.
Yeah, damn Fauci.
Yes. Mom, look at this man. I don't make the rules. Dr. Fauci makes the rules, Mom.
Oh, man,
we put a lock, a little latch up high on the front door. So if she ever got out the gate, or if we were, in the rest of the house and she was trying to get out, she couldn't really even look up to notice that there was a lock at the top of the door. So she'd go to the front door and try and open it. And she couldn't open it, and she'd get frustrated and turn around and walk back. And I just remember sitting in the living room watching TV with her behind me trying to get out the front door. And I think I even did a selfie with me, like, looking at my phone with her behind me trying to get out the front door. I'm like, Linda, you can't get out. And I'm opposite. So when Regan talks about, allowing them to go the way they want to go without, putting a roadblock in front of them and making a big deal out of something. Regan was masterful at always kind of redirecting her, and I'm the opposite. I'm like, "You're not going out there." I'm like, "No, you're not doing this." Like, always trying to make, get some sense into her. And Regan was always like, "No, you just gotta, yeah, of course, we'll go for a walk in 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes later, she's on to something else. And I would be like, "No, you can't go for a walk. You can't go outside." So it was always,
Maybe you were getting out some emotions that had been cooked up over the 30 years of abuse. Maybe that might have been the healthiest.
Yeah. You weren't rude to her, though. You would say, no, you can't leave right now, Linda. It's not time to leave.
Right.
You weren't rude
But I would
to
always
her.
tell her, no, you can't do this or you can't do that.
Yeah.
Because that's my natural.
That's the mom and dad. You know,
Right?
the mom and the dad have
Yeah.
different ways of dealing with the kids. And,
Yes, for sure. Right. And I would say, oh, the door is broken right now, but they're going to fix it in 5 minutes. So here, you want to go do a puzzle while they're getting it fixed?
God,
And she'll
just-
go, she
yeah.
would say, fine, I'll go do a puzzle. And then she'd sit down and do a puzzle, and then we didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Right.
Now, when she was trying to get out the gate at night, it was usually she just, so the reason we got the gate is because early on, I was asleep, and she got up in the night and got dressed and went out to the dining room area. And I wake up around 2 or 3 in the morning, and maybe Josh woke up, and he's like, Regan, the light's on out there. You want to go check on your mom? So I go out there, and there's my mom sitting. We had like 8.5. Our dining room tables were like 8.5 feet long. She's sitting at the head of it and sprawled all the way down the table, like some cartoon character at Thanksgiving, is literally almost the entire contents of our refrigerator and freezer.
Wow. I
like
didn't-
uncooked, just like the mustard and things like that. Wow.
Oh yeah, everything. Ice cream.
Wow.
Last night's dinner, tomorrow's lunch, more ice cream, pizza rolls, ketchup,
my
mustard,
gosh.
everything. And she's sitting at the head table with a bowl, a plate, a fork, and a knife and a spoon. And she's digging into a carton of ice cream, which is now half melted, because that's probably what she started with. But then she slowly unpacked the entire refrigerator and freezer. And I came out, I was like, hey, Mom, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, I'm just about to have a snack. Would you like to join me? And I was like, sure. Are you going to have one of everything? And she said, I might. Is that a problem? And I said, nope, not at all. And so I just sat with her and had her, I think I made her a sandwich and got her to eat that first. And then she had some ice cream, and she said, gosh, I made a really big mess. Do you mind helping me clean it up? I said, sure, Mom, I'll help you clean it up. And then she went back to bed, and the next night we had a baby gate.
Yeah. That's
Wow. Well, let's talk about the transition that ultimately had to come when you guys realized, hospice was going to be needed. Tell us about making that decision and what that process was like for you guys, because there's so much lack of clarity about hospice, even still to this day. You guys know I'm a hospice chaplain, and it's just fascinating what people think hospice could mean or might mean. And so I just want you to talk about it, from your experience.
Yes. So huge hospice fan, first of all. So she would have about once a year these catatonic attacks where she would just like freeze up, almost like she was having a seizure, but she wasn't having a seizure. And she would just kind of freeze up and glaze over and become stiff as a board. And that would go on for about 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And when she'd come to, she would kind of wake up and like vomit. And the first couple of times that this happened was so unnerving, and rushed to ER, into the ambulance, wherever we were at. It was really scary. So early November, gosh, it's been about a year ago, right? So early November last year, she had a series of them, so it was November 1st, because it was the day after Halloween. So November 1st, and then off to the ambulance, and then she was fine. They just send us home every time. So then I think the second and the third, and then one day she had 2, and it was just very scary. And what I realized was that after each one, she was cognitively worse. She was doing less, she was walking less, she had less mobility, less control of her body and her bowels, and whether or not she would eat or drink. She wasn't talking clearly, she wasn't creating complete sentences. So to me, what I understood of hospice was that you would bring hospice in to manage a disease or an issue health-wise that if left unmanaged was going to lead to your death. And Keith, you can clarify that for sure.
Right.
So this was definitely her last few stages of Alzheimer's was happening very quickly right before my eyes. And I knew that there's no reversing, right? I had done so many things for her, from, really getting an understanding of her medications or not having them, to her, what her diet should be and her water intake and her everything that went into her body was very purposeful and thought out, to help just slow this down as much as possible. But it was like the accelerator was on and there was nothing I could do about it at that point. I also couldn't move her. If she moved in the wrong way, she would have another one of these spells. So it became obvious that she needed a hospital bed. I needed more medical care. I needed more of a medical team surrounding me, where thus far it had been an emotional team and, the team support for just making sure grandma didn't, wander into the street or something like that. So
her room wasn't set up. We couldn't get a wheelchair in her.
Right. Yes.
Into her room either, so we couldn't.
Right. I couldn't get her into the shower without her having one of these catatonic spells. I couldn't get her to bed. I couldn't get her to, nothing could happen without this. So I started calling her doctor and explaining to him what was happening. And so I said, it's time for hospice. And he had gotten to know us good enough that I'm kind of surprised that he just ordered it. Like, is that a normal thing that the doctor just orders it like that? I don't know, but he did.
Especially if they're familiar with the case, yes.
Okay.
Well, no, remember you took her to the ER and they admitted her overnight.
That's
and they wouldn't let you be with her because of COVID.
Yes, because of COVID.
And they put gloves on her hands, remember,
Oh,
so
yeah.
she couldn't pull the wires out of her body.
Right. Oh yeah, it was a mess.
And then you went the next day, you told the doctor, no, I'm just coming to pick her up because she's not going to stay in the hospital like this and die like this. So that's when, I think that's kind of when hospice was triggered right after you brought her home.
Right. So I told the doctor she's been in the hospital. She needs to come home. She was in the hospital because of these catatonic attacks. They wanted to do more tests. And they said, all these tests came back clear. She's she's not having stroke. She's not having seizures. She doesn't have any blood clots. This is just her Alzheimer's progressing. So I called the doctor and he ordered hospice, but this was like on a Friday. And so they didn't come until Monday. And that whole weekend was so difficult. So once they got there Monday and I feel like the hospital bed got there first. Maybe the social worker came first. I'm sorry, I don't totally remember. But I would say that hospice was the very best decision for us, that it was absolutely lovely. Hospice makes a terrible situation and a terrible decision as easy as a terrible decision to have to make, as easy and as painless as possible.
That's a good way to describe it. Yeah. Okay. So were you prepared then? Is there anything you wish you'd known about hospice that you know now that you didn't know then that you could wish for others to know?
The biggest thing for me for hospice was that I was nervous when they said the word social worker, because some things we've been involved in the past, social worker is kind of a scary word. So I was really worried, like, oh, the social worker's coming. We've got to clean the house. And do we have enough bathrooms for how many people live in our house? And is she going to take her away to a home if she's not happy with how this looks? And blah, blah, like all this stuff I was really, really, really freaking out about. And that wasn't necessary at all.
Yeah.
The social worker is your friend. They are she was very, very kind and understanding and sweet and had all sorts of great information and support. So I wish that I had known that. Um, I feel like I had a grasp of hospice because I had heard from you, Keith, heard a death doula speak on end of life things, on how end of life can be. Even though it's a great loss, it can be a time of real beauty and a time of something beautiful to walk through with somebody, and a real honor to stand with somebody while they're going through that part of their life, whether or not they know that. So because I had heard that, and because I knew you and had those experiences and that knowledge, I wasn't afraid of hospice happening. I was just overly nervous about that social worker.
Right. That makes sense because, like you said, it does have connotations of legal and
like child protective services, sort of
coming
thing.
in and shutting things down or taking away, all that stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
So you really, from my vantage point, because I had some death midwife training and had volunteered for hospice for a bit prior to now becoming a chaplain, I knew a little bit of what was headed for you. I knew that you would have what it takes to walk this journey with your mom. I just didn't know what it would look like because it's each person's journey with walking our loved one home, so to speak, right? Is different. So for you, walking your mom home, let's say, to use that term, what was that like for you? What was beautiful about it? What was hard about it? What did that look and feel like?
Yeah. So my biggest thing was that she would, so she's stuck in this hospital bed, and for the first few days she would try to get out. But of course, if she would do that, she would have another one of these catatonic spells. So I was trying to keep her as happy and as comfortable in this bed as possible. So we would play old movies. It was the holiday season, so we were watching all the old classic shows. And then she even wanted to watch like Disney shows. So, and I would bring her puzzles. She couldn't really get any put together at all. But she would move the pieces around. Just trying to give her, if she was willing to eat, giving her food. Just trying to help that time be enjoyable.
Yeah.
And then also really making sure she knew how grateful I was, how grateful I am for the things that she was able to give me in my lifetime. So we had some really great times of me just sitting next to her on her bed. I would just jump up there with her and I would read to her different things. We read through a few books, but I would just sit and say to her, like literally from, Mom, thank you so much for birthing me. Like that's a hard thing for a woman to go through, especially she was older. Thank you for, being an older woman that birthed a child. Thank you for putting me in private Christian school. Because of that private Christian school, I met Jesus. Thank you for that. Thank you. And I met my very best friend, Amy, and, just all of these things that I literally just went through my whole life and told her thank you for. Or I'd sit and tell her thank you for, she had some really great trips with my nieces, her granddaughters, and neat travel experiences around the country with, her stepkids or her other grandchildren, things like that. So I would just tell her stories of her different travels and experiences with all of her family members. And on days that she did seem lucid, I would ask her to retell me stories from her childhood. She had these amazing stories from her and her cousins growing up together, funny stories with her brother and her sister-in-law. So it was really, I just wanted to spend. She was a woman that really loved to create experiences for people and memories for people. So I just really wanted to kind of walk down memory lane with her as often as possible, to help her know that she had such a full, such a full and meaningful life, and that she was leaving something behind. You know, Keith, you and Josh have been talking about like leaving a legacy. And I can imagine that at that point in her life, especially if she had more cognition, she would be wondering about, you know, what have I left behind? What am I leaving behind? And I wanted to make sure that even though she had no clue that she was dying, no clue that I was able to see anyway, that she had left behind some really wonderful things.
Wow.
Regan gets Daughter of the Year award, by the way.
Yeah, my goodness. And Regan, if I remember correctly, you said November, so it was November of last year that she went on hospice. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. November 7th.
Okay. Yeah. And then you guys journeyed together, and how long was that process of walking her home?
Yeah. So she passed away on January 7th of this year. So my whole life, you know, she had always expressed that she believed in God and believed in Jesus. And so, you know, I would have those conversations with her as well. And I think that that's like any person of faith's thing, right? They want to check in with their loved one,
For
that,
sure.
you know, wherever they are at with their spiritual journey is where they want to be at. And she said, yes, I believe that I am going to heaven. I do know that. And so that was really powerful for me.
For sure.
And then it was also really difficult because, you know, you're watching her, you know, she's sleeping and just, you know, they talk about the death rattle. And honestly, she was a loud snorer anyway. So it wasn't that different than how she normally slept. But, you know, they're on pain medication and you're managing their pain levels. And I'm having to, I'm constantly checking her heart rate and her temperature. And, you know, just watching her body disintegrate. And, you know, this is something I wish I had known. So they talk about bed sores. And that's a bad thing, right? When you're in a hospital and you have bed sores, it means that your nurse isn't turning you or taking care of you well, or, you know, you're not being managed well. So she's turning up with bed sores, and I'm doing everything I can. You know, with the hospital bed, I ordered the special inflatable bed that adjusts constantly to readjust pressure all over her body. And I've got all this different pillows and foam things and special stickers on her heels and special pads on her hips and all this stuff. And yet these bed sores are still just everywhere. And the nurse came, I was in tears. I said, I don't know how to get these to go away. They just are still coming. And look, these ones on her hip bones, you know, she's laying on her bed, but they're like on her hip bones now. And the nurse said, Regan, her body's disintegrating. Her body's just putting weight on itself, and she has no body fat left because, you know, she's not eating at all. She won't take food, or if she does take some, she spits it out. It just is going to happen. There's literally nothing you can do to make that not happen. And that was the biggest relief of my life. She, you know, she said, do everything you can because they can be painful. And that's part of, you know, the pain medication also. But you're not going to make them go away.
Right.
And that was so relieving to me because here I just felt like I wasn't doing a good job. Like, oh my gosh, I'm moving these pillows around every, you know, 2 hours. Do I need to do it every half hour? Like, I'm going to be up in the night moving her around. So just trying to keep her comfortable.
Yeah, it's like setting realistic expectations that nobody, like you said, nobody really prepares us for, that we didn't know, right? You didn't know. You thought, okay, the expectation was if I do this well enough, she won't get bed sores. And, and the nurse is like, no, reality check, you know, she's going to get bed sores.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, you know, there's something, you know, about, okay, so she's not getting any better. Her body is disintegrating. She will not eat. She's ready to go to heaven. Okay, Lord, take her now. Like, let's go. Let's stop this pain and agony for her and everybody around her. And let's just take her home, Lord. Why are you not taking her home?
I remember so vividly you going over to her. I don't know how many weeks that she was not conscious, really. It was a few weeks.
Yeah, it was
really.
a couple of weeks.
But she wasn't eating. She didn't eat for weeks.
Right. The last thing, this is funny, and just so the last sip of anything that she drank and kept down was her New Year's Eve toast, cheersing with the Martinelli's apple cider. But before that, she hadn't really eaten hardly anything in about a week or two. And she cheers that Martinelli's, and then that was the last thing that she drank or ate.
Right.
I just remember so vividly you just saying, "Mom, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can go now.
Yeah.
You don't need to live for anything else. You've done it all, and it's okay now. You can go."
Yes. And that is one thing. Keith, you were not yet working on staff at a hospice. Well, we were just kind of assigned our hospice from our doctor also, but our chaplain had said, it's important to keep telling them, it's important to let them know that they can go. So I was doing that. And then there was one night I was changing her diaper, and I was singing. What was I singing? I'll have to try and remember what I was singing. I have a terrible singing voice, but I was singing, and I thought, well, maybe this will make her go if I'm singing to her. I think I was singing.
Rush her off.
Yeah. Because it was so bad. That's what you mean?
Yeah.
She'd have to get
like,
out
oh my
of
God,
there.
kill! You know when we say, "Kill me now."
Yeah, she said.
Yes. Okay, I'll go already. Just anything but this. So I was singing this song. It was a catchy song from an old TV show, but I don't. Anyway, and I put her on her side, and as I'm singing the song, and I know she stopped breathing, and I thought, oh my gosh, she just died while I'm changing her diaper. What do I do? And I thought, well, you better finish changing her diaper and just get her clothed. So I laid her back down, and I got her diaper back on, and all of a sudden she did this huge inhale and kept breathing. And I was like, oh my gosh, what in the world? And so then I started telling her, my mom loved like decorating and choosing wallpaper and drapes and all this stuff. So I started telling her, in our faith, the Bible talks about mansions in heaven. And so I said to her, Mom, I think you've seen this bright light. When you see it again, go to it. On the other side of the light, there is a mansion there for you. Jesus has a mansion there for you. And it's really important that you go and you start getting it decorated. Dad cannot go there first because he's terrible at decorating, and he's going to come there too, but you got to have it decorated and ready for him. You got to go, Mom. It's okay. It's okay for you to go. It's really great there. So then another day or two passes, and I talked to the chaplain, and he said, was your mom a very private woman? And I said, yes, very. And he said, this is going to feel very counterintuitive to you, but some people just want to be alone. You have been on guard with your mom basically 24/7. Maybe she hasn't had the chance to do what she wants to do alone. And then he told me a story of a woman whose husband was at a very painful end of life with cancer, and she literally hovered over him 24 hours a day. And he had told her, why don't you just go take a walk? And while the woman was out walking, her husband passed. So this is totally counterintuitive to me because I am the opposite. I am like, if I am on my deathbed, I want all my people around me, if they can stand it, and I want to be singing songs and everybody eating my favorite food, and me too if I can, and just singing together. And I just want to pass to heaven, going from their songs to Jesus songs. Like, let's just all be together. Let's just be in community and loving on one another, all my people. But my mom is quite the opposite. And so my daughter-in-law, we had arranged to go to lunch, and I was really quite certain that it was the day that, every day at this point, I'm like, okay, today's the day. Oh, today's the day. And I had even said to Ezra, you need to decide if you want to be home or not when it happens. And he said, no, I don't. I said, okay, I think it's the day for you to take your bag and go to Nan and Pop-Pop's house for a couple of days, because I really think it's going to happen in the next couple of days. So my daughter-in-law and I were going to lunch, and I almost canceled. And then I remembered what the chaplain said. And I had cameras on my mom, so I could check on her in the night, or if I walked over to the neighbor's house or something, I could keep an eye on her. So I said to my mom, I'm going to go run some errands. I just have to go drop something off at the post office and run a couple of errands, and then I'll be right back. But it's not any fun errands, so you're not missing out on anything, and I'll be right back. I'm going to put on your show. And I put on White Christmas. And no, it wasn't White Christmas. It was Wizard of Oz. And I left the house. And I went to lunch with my daughter-in-law. And little do I know, I didn't realize this at the time, that my mother-in-law came over at that time, and she was knocking on the door and nobody answered. So then she thought, she's just having a peaceful moment. So she sat in the car and prayed for us and then drove away. And then we went home, and as we pulled up to the house, I knew something just felt different. And so I said to Cheyenne, our daughter-in-law, she was picking something up at the house. I said, so I think you should just get your thing and go really quickly, because I think this is the time. And we walked in the front door, and our dogs were going absolutely crazy. And I could tell, her bed, the hospital bed, was sitting in the front window, not facing the front door, facing the TV and the Christmas tree. And I could tell from between the dogs and the energy and how her head was sitting in the bed, I could tell that she had passed. And so my daughter-in-law got her things and was leaving. And I went over and checked on my mom, and she had gone. And I said, you stinker. You just wanted to be alone. And I also said, I'm so sorry, Mom. And I was really walking it how I would want people to walk with me. And I needed to probably be walking it more how she would have. But, she was so different than who she normally was my whole life, right? So a lot of it she liked having, we would do gatherings, and we would all be in the front room, and we have pictures of us, all the girls in their matching Christmas jammies, and my mom's in her matching Christmas jammies. And to some it might look very twisted, but we're all standing around in our matching Christmas jammies around this hospital bed. But she wanted to be by herself. And my daughter-in-law left, and my son had actually briefly come in and out. And then because of what I had learned through you, Keith, I knew that this was a time to just sit and be. And so I did I don't think I called and told anybody for about 45 minutes or an hour. And I just sat and thought about her life, and thought a lot about the journey that myself and my family had been on for that 3.5 years. And that, kind of like, wow, that was a lot. And we did it. Yeah. We made it. We did it. And I think we did it well, and we made it. And it came with a lot of sacrifice, emotionally. We had a lot of loss come out of that time, and making the decision to do that for my mom. We lost family members that judged us that we were doing it for some ulterior motive. So, I'm down like and children. So like 15 family members. But you know what? I wouldn't change any of it at all. Not for 1 second, because as I sat there, I knew that we had done the right thing and that we had done it well, and we'd done it to our very best of our ability. So I just thought about her life and her time with us, and really just her whole life. And in that, I made the first phone call I made was to her lifelong friend, Camille, that was her longest friend since junior high or high school. I decided that since Camille had known her the longest in her life, that she would be the first person that I called.
I like that.
And, you know, as you start calling people that you don't always call, they're expecting that phone call, you know. So I think that's a hard thing to start going through. So I called, and this sweet little old lady says, and she's, gosh, no bigger than a jug of milk, and this little Italian woman, and she says, she just answered the phone, and she said, "Oh, honey, your mom, I'm so sorry." So her and I chatted, and I got off the phone with her, and then I just sat for another probably half hour before I called her husband, my dad, and discussed with him, you know, who he would call and who I would call. And I took about 10 or 15 minutes between each phone call. And I think, and I know that I've said thank you a million times, Keith, to you, and I forget her name, but the gal who I heard speak, the death doula.
Alyssa.
Alyssa, thank you.
Yeah.
If I had not had that, this experience would not have been as whole and complete as it was if I had not had that opportunity to hear her and to know you. That I really just sat in each of those moments. And as I called each person, even though I had this list of people I needed to call, they all wanted to share their stories or talk about my mom or thank us or whatever. And where the Regan that didn't have that information would have rushed them through each phone call and not really absorbed those stories. To get to the next person to check it off. Right. But because I did have your experience, I just sat and listened and enjoyed every word that each of those people said.
Love that.
And then, you know, as a person of faith, you know, I just wonder, like, okay, God, is it all real? Do you really have her? What's my sign, God? Show me a sign. So my sweet mother-in-law is a pastor's wife, and she, every time somebody passes away, she sends them a card, either with it already printed on, with the 23rd Psalm already printed on it, or she writes it out herself. And honestly, I always thought that was super cliche, and that as a pastor's wife, she surely could have come up with something better than that, because by golly, isn't that what everybody uses? So I have this Flippy verse calendar thing that does a verse every day. And often, Keith, you know me so well that you're not surprised by this, and you know this story, but I look to my verse on my calendar Flippy thing for just some inspiration or idea for the day, or what I might need to cling to, or affirmation I might need to have. And it was quite a bit after, you know, a couple hours after she had passed away, and I realized I had not flipped the verse for the day yet, all day. And this was now like 4:30 at night or something. And I look up at the thing, it's sitting on the entryway dresser of our home, and I went, oh, the verse. What's the verse today? And I flip it, and it's the 23rd Psalm. And it just gave me a huge amount of I just felt like this big check from the Lord. Like, yes, it's all good. I've got it all. It's all good.
Yeah.
So then I didn't even call hospice for like 3 hours till she had passed away. Maybe it was longer. It was like 4 hours.
Yeah.
But I called like at 4:55 because I didn't want to get put to the exchange and go through all that.
Right.
So I call, and the chaplain gets there about 20 minutes later, and he sits down and he goes, okay, what do you think the approximate time of death was? And, he's waiting. Most people say like, oh, like 5 minutes before I called you or whatever. I was like, it was approximately 12:45. And he looks at me with just shock, like, what? 12? Are you sure? 12:45? I said, yes. I said, one of our dear friends is a death doula. So I was really prepared kind of for sitting here and absorbing all of this for a few hours. And as soon as I said death doula, he was like, oh, yes, okay, of course. Like, then he was not alarmed any longer that I had waited that long to call him. And then, of course, once he said, who's your friend? I said, Keith Page. And of course, it's not 7 degrees from Kevin Bacon. It's 3 degrees from Keith Page. And he, of course, knows you or knew of you.
That's funny.
So that was hilarious.
I love it. Wow. Wow. Well, this, I mean, I just, I lived it with you, but I'm enjoying hearing you say it. I'm also looking across the table, watching Brandon enjoy it as well. And
do you mind actually telling me what Psalm 23 is? I don't have that one memorized, or do you have it? Do you know it? Does it have a?
I do. I have my flippy calendar right in front of me, actually.
Is it 23 today? That'd be. When you were saying that, you couldn't hear this, but fireworks went off, and that could. I don't know if that's a sign or just the fact that we live in Costa Mesa, but right when you were saying about the calendar, the fireworks went off. You're like, that's a check from the Lord. Pop, pop.
That's wild. Mm-hmm. So it is. The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
Thank you for reading that. The fireworks just went off again.
Yeah, they did. The fireworks just went off just as you finished.
That's amazing. I will say that one thing that a friend of mine had warned me about, and then Alyssa had said also, when the morgue, or is it the mortuary comes to pick up the body, don't be in the room. Try not to even be in the house, because the sound of that body moving and the zip of that bag can be so traumatizing. And so I had, nobody was home. It was just me and the chaplain. Josh had left to get food. Nobody was home, and I really believed that I had wanted to just be alone in that moment when they showed up for the body. And then they showed up, and I was instantly kind of frozen. I said goodbye to her one more time, and I kissed her forehead, and I made sure, there wasn't anything else I needed to say or do. And I instantly felt like, okay, I'm going to go walk around my neighborhood, but I'm going to walk by myself. I instantly, for the first time all day, did not want to be alone. And don't you know, my in-laws, who I'm very, very close to, walked through the door at that exact moment. And I said, well, thank you, Jesus. And that's perfect timing. And so we left and we walked around the neighborhood. At the entrance to our neighborhood, this one house had this ginormous ficus tree, and he had it shaped like in a big U. And then he would decorate it with lights, so it looked like a face, like a smiley face. And it would be different lights depending on the season. And so this was, after Christmas, so it still had Christmassy lights, but it's like a big smiley face. And then another neighbor actually wrote a book called The Smiling Tree, and we had the book, but my mom always loved to see this tree. it made her so happy to see it. And we would walk to it and look at it or drive by it. And so we went outside, and I think it was my father-in-law said, let's go over to the tree. So we walked around the corner and stood looking at the tree, waiting for the chaplain to text me and give me the heads up that we could come back. But the mortuary's vehicles actually drove right by us. And I thought this was so interesting. They saw us standing there and waved to us, waved goodbye to us. And I thought that was so wild that they waved goodbye to us. And so we walked back, and it was really just so meaningful. All of it had so much meaning. And I think that it really had so much meaning because I, from your wisdom, left space for there to be meaning. I didn't force any of it. I didn't look for any of it. I didn't plan any of it. I just left space for it.
I love that. It's a beautiful picture. I didn't know some of what you're telling me. Maybe you've said it before, some of this after, the walk around the block and stuff, but I just love hearing that and these insights. And, we're pushing up on almost an hour and 45, and time's just gone by so quick. But I want to just ask, it's just an amazing story, and I know it's still being written because, you guys are now living in community with your in-laws who are, still healthy, but you're going to probably have the opportunity to what have enjoyed and benefited from some of my experience. And you mentioned Alyssa, now people are going to be listening to you, and you are going to be an encouragement and a voice of support, and then have some more opportunities to, love some more, walk some more folks home through this journey of love. But what has this year now been like, this year of grief? That anything first comes to mind as you hear me ask that for you?
Yeah. There's been a lot of healing. There's been a lot of angst, and I think this happens in families after death.
Sure does.
There's dissections in the family per se. So I know that it's not just a special case with us. So a lot of that's been really hard. Actually, yesterday was my birthday, and it was my first birthday without my mom. And that was really hard. I've purposefully leaned into a lot of feeling the pain. So instead of trying to run away from the pain or hide the pain or ignore the pain or pretend like it wasn't there, I've let myself feel it so that it doesn't just fester and bubble up and become some gross thing. We've moved to a new home. And so I think that that going through the holidays and things in a different location will be helpful to me, to not be sitting in the same living room where my mom was or where our last Christmas was, or, we really had 3 or 4 Christmases with her in that home. I'm not in Orange County driving around being reminded of, oh, this is where she put me at school, and this was where our house was, and this is where this was, right? So I don't have all those triggers per se. So that's been very healing. It's been very peaceful. I really feel like this whole year, God's just been saying to me, what if everything's just going to be okay? So much of walking through caregiving and death and hospice and all that stuff with somebody and managing somebody's care and health care is, oh, she might do this, or what if she chokes on that, or what if this happens, or what if she has a reaction to that medication? There's all these, like having a newborn or a preschooler, it's all this worry, right? And I'm kind of in this space of, what if everything's just going to be okay now? And that's been really enlightening and freeing. And then a big part of me is like, okay, what am I going to do now that I'm grown up? Like my kid, Ezra, the youngest, turned 18 and graduated high school. So, and I, I'm not caretaking my mom anymore. So now I got to figure out, do I go back after my floristry or my events, or we have a few other ideas. Josh and I, we always do. So now it's just about picking something to do and doing it, figuring out with my gifting, do I buy a piece of land and put a bunch of tiny homes on there and bring in all the dementia patients that can fit, and pack them up and take them to Dollywood on field trips.
Absolutely. Yep. Maybe.
Dolly would appreciate it.
Right?
Yeah.
Ice cream once a day, Pauhana charcuterie boards. What should we do? I don't know.
I love it.
Thank you for sharing. I know it's probably something you've probably gone through the story many times, but it's always a little different, and it can be very taxing because there's a lot of stuff. So thank you for opening up and sharing stuff that's, probably still pretty tender. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I did get to share the story a lot with Keith. He did her celebration of life for us.
Very fun.
And he did as I was recounting some things before tonight, I thought about that celebration of life and how neat it was, Keith, to hear the retelling of her life and who she is as a person from as you told it. It was, that was really very healing for me. She had a very full, beautiful life. She did a lot of wonderful, wonderful things. She impacted a lot of people's lives, people that shared that day. And it was really beautiful.
Well, it's because I hang out with Josh all the time, so I'd only gotten one person's perspective. and he liked her. He just, was convinced she didn't really like him. But no, it was cool to lead that celebration and to see the response, and like you said, and these friends of yours, and just this community honor her so well.
Yeah.
So if listeners want to reach out to Brandon or I because they have questions, for you, do we have permission to connect you to them to you, kind of thing?
Sure, absolutely. Yep, you can share my email address or, that's my email address.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've had a really beautiful opportunity to consult with a few families, kind of starting on this path.
Love that.
To decide what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and that's been really neat.
Well, what Brandon and I talk about this because a number of our guests are either from hospice chaplains to death midwives, and Brandon hanging out with me has to hear me talk about a lot of this. But we're all facing it, right?
Right.
It's all right here, and now you've got this amazing experience that you get to. It's like in recovery, they say, "Oh, we get to share our experience, strength, and hope." Not everybody has had years of getting sober or whatever, but once you do, you're like, "Wow, I could be really valuable." Well, I think the same is true when we've walked well with somebody else through, illness and dying and grief. We become super valuable to everyone else who's going to experience that, and in so far, it's 100%.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have hospitality, gifting, and creating events and all that, and now live in a place where land and space and construction and all that is possible. Sky's the limit of what could happen there. And you and Josh are on my top. My exit strategy for me is if I get dementia, whatever, it's either, I always said, send me to a compound with Suresh in India and just let me wander around with the chickens and I'll know I'll get fed. That was my only option. But now that you guys are in Tennessee, because you guys were in Huntington at the time, but now that you're in Tennessee, I'm like, wait, shit. Okay, Suresh, India, chickens. No offense, Suresh, but I'm going with Josh and Regan, Dollywood, and ice cream.
That's good.
In Tennessee. And it's easier for my daughters to come visit too. So
yeah. Absolutely. We got your back, Keith.
Yeah, good. I appreciate that. Just put a big fence around the property and you let me drink coffee every day, and I'm good.
We'll use an electric fence.
There you go.
Absolutely not.
That's right.
Just a low grade one, like one of those trick pens, that zaps you, it's like a buzzer, like a shun.
It's a vibrator thing.
That's right.
Around the
That's right.
collar.
Yep.
Little hand buzzer thing. Yeah, old school.
Yeah,
I used to do
little.
magic tricks as a kid. No one's shocked by that at all.
Not at all, right? I'm like, oh, of course you did.
Yeah,
right?
I
makes
can
sense.
see it.
Yeah.
I can see it.
But, great fireworks in Tennessee. I've been there once. I was in Kentucky and we drove down to Tennessee to get the real stuff. So if you guys, I know you weren't there for 4th of July, but next year get excited for that.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
Okay, you guys. Well, thank you again for being our guests, and this is awesome for us to hear it, and now for us to be able to put it out on Kindness Rising is just really, really something. And when all of our themes are always backed around kindness, and I don't think there's a better act of kindness and love than walking a loved one home and showing them hospitality and love and cooking meals and letting them be in your home long before she was on hospice, right? You guys took her in, so
Yes.
It's a beautiful example. So thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you for having us on, and being that person for her was one of the greatest honors of my life. So I'm glad that I get to share about it, and hopefully help other people while they start considering or being into that same opportunity.
Yeah. All right. To be continued.
All right.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
As always, the Kindness Rising podcast is brought to you by Kindness Rising. Kindness Rising is a community organization committed to inspiring, equipping, and resourcing people to lead lives that flourish, grounded in kindness, and aimed at making the world a better place. For more information, please visit our website at kindnessrising.community. There you can find out about our upcoming events, how to get involved. You can sign up for our newsletter, find out more information about this podcast, or even donate. Kindness Rising is supported solely by the generous contribution of our lovely donors. So if you would like to help support us, please go to kindnessrising.community/donate.